A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Today we have to start from verse number 97 of Surah An-Nisa, the women. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Innal lazina tawaffahumul malaikatu zalimi anfusihim qalu fima kuntum qalu kunna mustadafina fil ard qalu alam takun ardullahi wasi'atun fatuhajiru fiha fa ulaika ma'wahum jahannam wa sa'at masira. So this means indeed those whose souls are drawn out by the angels when they are being cruel to their own selves, that is by not believing, will be asked, what occupied you? They will reply, we were helpless in the land. The angels will say, was not the land of God vast enough for you to migrate in? They are the ones whose abode will be hell, an evil dwelling place. So there's a background to this verse, that there were many people who were first accepting Islam and then reverting back to their own religion for various reasons. So there were about 50 men in Makkah who accepted Islam and then they reverted for some kind of convenience for themselves. And some of them even came with the Kafirs to the Battle of Badr, and they were fighting on the side of the unbelievers, and they were fighting against the believers. And all of them were killed. And this is a hadith of Hazrat Ibn Abbas, so we have to believe it. So here it is being said that those whose souls are drawn out by the angels, so when these people die, naturally the angel of death will come and draw out their souls or pull out their souls from their bodies when they are being cruel to their own selves. By being cruel to their own selves, here it means that those who they saw the goodness of the Prophet and they believed, they could see that he was a real Prophet, and then in spite of that they went back to their original religion, to polytheism, and in this way they were harming themselves. So those angels who are pulling out their souls will ask them, what occupied you? Why were you so, what were you so busy in that you could not migrate? They will reply, we were helpless in the land. So helpless in the land means that, the Kafirs forced us to fight against the Muslims or something like that, or go back to our old religion. But then the angel will say, what not the land of God vast enough for you to migrate? There was at that time, there were no problems of visas and nationalities and all, and you could just sort of travel to any place and decide to camp there forever. So was not the land of God vast enough for you to migrate in? They are the ones whose abode will be hell, an evil dwelling place. So they have harmed themselves by going back to their original wrong faith. And this was a time when the Prophet migrated, it became an obligatory duty, it became a farz to migrate for all the believers. Why was it a farz? Because at that time it was not easy for the believers to practice their faith in Makkah, because they were being persecuted all the time. And if it's not easy, the ones who are weak in some way or the other, they will revert back. So it was made an obligation for them to migrate. And besides the Muslims the Muslims in Medina needed more manpower, because the non-believers had started attacking them, and also there were these wars. So they needed more manpower and they didn't have enough men. So this was also a reason why they should have migrated. So these people who were made to fight in Badr against the believers, some of them were also captured. And in Surah Al-Anfal, that is Surah number 8, verse 70, there is said that there is some hope of forgiveness for those who are captured. There is always hope for forgiveness when somebody, says Tawbah. When anyone who does Tawbah, God says, I will forgive you. The one who asks for forgiveness will most probably be forgiven as long as he has not seen the angel of death. Then it will be too late, like it was for Pharaoh, When he started drowning in the sea, he said, I believe in the Lord of Musa and Harun. And then God said, it's too late now. That is called a tawbatul yas. That means it's just a tawbah, and asking for forgiveness, which becomes just a wish that is never fulfilled. But there was a great reward for those who migrated for the faith. Because of the faith, they took up. At that time, they were not sure what they will have to face when they go to Medina. So those who were strong enough, they said, no matter what we have to face, we will do this for the sake of our faith and for God and for His Prophet. All right, so this is about yes, another thing happened in this incident, that when some Sahaba knew them as Muslims, because they had accepted the faith when the Sahaba were in Makkah. So they started praying for them, thinking that they were believers, until this verse was revealed. إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. That means, except for the weak among the men and women and children, who could not draw a plan of escape nor knew the way out. So these were the people who were helpless, the weak men, or the people who were ill, and the women and the children. Sometimes the men migrated alone. They could not take the risk of taking their family with them. They didn't know what they would be facing in Medina or on the way. So that is why these people are exempt from God's wrath, from His anger, because they are helpless. فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. They are the ones whom it is hoped God will pardon. God is the effacer of sins and the much forgiving. Afuwan, that means He ignores your shortcomings or sins, and Ghafoor, of course, is the much forgiving. وَمَنْ يُهَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعَةً وَمَنْ يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُهَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتَ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. So those who migrate, the one who migrates in the way of God will find a good refuge on earth and a bounteous provision. The word muragaman is used here, which means that he will find easy way of escape, and when he reaches this destination, then he will be rewarded with a bounteous provision. And for the one who departs from home for migration in the way of God and His Prophet and dies on the way, God is responsible for the reward. That means, since he had made the intention, the niyat, to migrate and go to Medina, and he died on the way, then he will get as much reward as those who had actually migrated and reached Medina. So God is responsible for the reward, and is the much forgiving, the ever merciful. Now, there was an old man, I think his name was Ibn Zumra, and hearing about this verse 97, he asked his sons to help him travel to Medina, and he was so old and weak that he had to be carried all the way on a bed, but he died on the way. So many commentators think that this verse number 100 was revealed after this incident of when this man died. Some commentators think that this verse about traveling, one who migrates in the way of God, also applies to any kind of lawful travel. That is, if someone is going to seek knowledge, or if he's going for Hajj or Jihad, and if he's trying to escape religious persecution where he cannot practice his faith fully, or he's seeking lawful provision, that is, he's trying to go and earn a living. Some commentators have included all this kind of traffic in this, what is meant here by who migrates in the way of God. وَإِذَا تَرَكْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانَ لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. When you travel in the land in the cause of God, there is no harm if you reduce your prayer. taqsuru, qasr, that is reducing the amount of units or the rakat that you are praying in your namaz. If you fear that the unbelievers will create trouble for you. Now this is, of course, mostly for jihad, because if all the jihadis, all the soldiers are there praying in one congregation, then the enemy will find this to be a good opportunity to attack them from the back. So here it is being said that one exemption or an ease that is being given here is that you can reduce your prayers. Instead of 4 rakat, you can say 2. And this is for all kinds of travel, whether you're just going for any reason. If you are traveling, now the question arises, how much travel? So the travel that is in which you are allowed to reduce your prayer from 4 to 2 units it is said that if it is either 54 miles or 14 days of stay in that place to which you have traveled. Otherwise, you have to, and all the other prayers like the 3 units and the 2 units have to be prayed fully. Now, migration is a word which can be, it has an expanded meaning. One migration is the physical migration. One can travel from one country to another for whatever reasons we have discussed. Another migration is the migration of a person's soul, his spirit, his thinking. That is a spiritual migration. That means leaving one's wrong faith and practice and moving towards the worship of the one God. That is also a high form of migration. Alright, the salat or the prayer that we are saying during our migration is called a salatul safar. Now there is another kind of salat which has to be said in a particular manner, and that is salatul khawf. Khawf means fear or danger. Another point I'd like to mention here that even in times of peace, if we are traveling under these conditions that we just talked about, then you don't have to say, oh, I have all the ease and comfort, so I can just say 4 instead of 2, because even the Prophet reduced his prayer and he said, this is a blessing for you from God. Someone asked him, we are comfortable here, can we say our full prayer? And he said, no, but this is a blessing for you from God, so you have to accept it. The spiritual migration or exodus from evil towards good, you will find is mentioned in the Quran several times. That is a travel from darkness into light. Minaz zulumate ilan nur, from darkness into light. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ مَعَكَ وَلْيَأْخُذُوا أَسْلِحَتَهُمْ. So, and when you are among them, that is when the Prophet is among his followers, and when you lead their congregation, the Jamaat, then a group from among them should remain standing with you and should keep holding their arms. So this is in the time of battle. If the enemy is close by, or if you have already started the battle with them, then. And everybody wants to pray behind the Prophet when he's there. No one wants to say, we can say our own separate Jamaat, no. So then the method is that they will divide into groups, probably 2 groups, and then they will pray in installments, you might say. That one group will pray one unit of prayer and move back, and the other will move forward and pray another unit of prayer and then move back, and then they can finish their prayers on their own. So this is what I've understood. It's a little difficult to follow actually, but since it doesn't really apply to us, we can just sort of understand the main basic practice. So even when they are praying, they have to keep holding up their arms, so that if the enemy attacks them, they are able to fight them at once. فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا فَلْيَكُونُوا مِنْ وَرَائِكُمْ وَلْتَأْتِ طَائِفَةٌ أُخْرَى لَمْ يَصَلُّوا فَلْيُصَلُّوا مَعَكَ وَلْيَأْخُذُوا إِزْرَهُمْ وَأَسْلِحَتَهُمْ وَدَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ تَغْفُلُونَ عَنْ أَسْلِحَتِكُمْ وَأَمْتِعَتِكُمْ فَيَمِيلُونَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَيْلَةً وَاحِدَةً. So when they have prostrated, that is, when one group has done their sajda, they should move behind, and the second group, which has not prayed so far, should step forward and pray behind you and keep holding their implements of defense and their arms. The unbelievers wish that you would be negligent of your arms. Naturally, the enemy who is fighting you would want you to be negligent of your arms and your provisions so that they would make one sudden attack. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِنْ كَانَ بِكُمْ أَذًى مِنْ مَطَرٍ أَوْ كُنْتُمْ مَرْضَىٰ أَنْ تَضَعُوا أَسْلِحَتَكُمْ وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَعَدَّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا. There is no harm if, because of the inconvenience of rain or illness, there might be an additional problem of it's raining when you're in the battlefield and you have to put away your arms. But be cautious. Indeed, God has prepared for the unbelievers a shameful punishment. So if they are in the battlefield, they have to be aware all the time that they are in the battlefield and they have to be prepared to fight back. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ فَإِذَا اطْمَأْنَنْتُمْ فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. When you have finished your prayer, remember God standing and sitting and lying down. When you become secure, then pray according to custom. Indeed, prayer is for the believers an obligation which is time-related. So when you have finished this obligatory prayer, then whether you are standing or sitting or lying down, whatever you are doing, in whatever position you are, in your heart you should keep remembering God. The remembrance of God, the zikr of God should always be with you. And I think this is not just for the jihadis, for those people who are in the battlefield, but I think this can apply to anybody who's a believer, that whenever he has, for example, people travel, maybe they're traveling by bus or by car or train, and they have so much free time in which they can't do anything else, then it is a good idea to keep reciting some zikr which will help you in so many ways. So prayer is for the believers an obligation which is time related. This is talking about the obligatory prayer which is time bound, because one should compare it to the time for school. For example, if a school opens up, or they start school at 8 o'clock in the morning, then you can't go, just straddling along and say, okay, I'll be there by 8:30. No, you have to be there at 8 o'clock. So in the same way, the prayer, the obligatory salat is for the believers an obligation. Sometimes, we say that, and I also am guilty of this. We say, oh, there's a lot of time left for example, Zuhar prayer or Isha prayer. There is a lot of span of that time. And we say, oh, it doesn't matter. Let me watch this or that, or let me do something else, and then I'll say my prayers. But the earlier one says one's prayer, the more reward there is for it. It is time bound. Mawquta, that means cannot be said according to one's wishes, especially concerning time. وَلَا تَهِنُوا فِي ابْتِغَاءِ الْقَوْمِ إِن تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ فَإِنَّهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَعْلَمُونَ وَتَرْجُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ مَا لَا يَرْجُونَ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. And do not show weakness in pursuing the enemy. If you suffer, they have also suffered just as you suffered. But you have hope of recompense from God, which they do not. God is the all-knowing, the wise. This is of course a general statement that if the enemy is running away, then you're supposed to pursue the enemy as long as you can, so that you make sure they do not turn back and attack you like they did in Uhud. So if you suffer, they have also suffered just as you suffered, but you have an advantage. What is the advantage? That you are fighting in the way of God, and God knows it. And even if you have committed some mistake, He will forgive you. But still you are doing it for the sake of God. And this also applies in general, it is there, but also in particular it applies to the Battle of Uhud, when the enemy took a turn and they attacked the believers from the back, because they had left their positions to which they had been stationed, and they started collecting the loot, the spoils of war. But then, when they fought back, then the enemy also ran away. And in that case, I think the Prophet ﷺ said that we have to pursue them, otherwise they might return to get their goods and whatever they have left behind. So here it is being said that you should not show weakness in pursuing the enemy. Inna anzalna ilayka al-kitaba bil-haqqi litahkuma bayna an-nasi bima araka Allah wa la takun lil-khayinina khasima. Indeed, we have revealed to you the book with the truth, so that you may judge between people the way God has shown you, and do not become a supporter of the dishonest. Now, in particular, this of course again is a general statement. Once the book is there, the Quran is there, then you have to judge according to rules set down by the Quran, so that you may judge people between people the way God has shown you. And this, of course, is being said to the Prophet, but it applies to all the believers and it applies forever. And do not become a supporter of the dishonest. Now, this is very important and a very difficult thing to do. If, supposing one of the suspects against whom the case is being fought is a relative, a close relative or a close friend who you have known for so long, then automatically you will want to help that person. But if you are sure that this person was in the wrong, then you are not supposed to help him, because if you do, then you are going against the policies and the principles set by the Prophet and of course by God. This in particular applies to a certain case in which a person from the Qabila Bani Zafar, the tribe of Bani Zafar, who were from the Ansar, that means they were the original dwellers of Medina. And this man's name was Tama bin Ubiraq. He once stole from somebody's house. He stole a lot of things. He stole some expensive armor and a lot of bags of grain. And you see, in those days, the houses were made of mud or some other such material which was easy to break through. So what the thieves used to make a hole in the wall close to the floor and either creep in or pull out things which they knew they were there. So what this man did, he stole these things and he made some holes in another Jewish man's house and he put those things there so that if this case came up, then the Jewish man would be caught. And the Jew's name was Zayd bin Samin, but in various commentaries you find that different names are given. Anyway, the name doesn't really matter, but it was a Jewish person. Now what this man, Tama, did was that when actually the case was brought to the Prophet, and the whole tribe of Tama, the Qabila Bani Zafar, they sided with the man from their tribe. And they put all kinds of pressure on the Prophet to make a ruling, to give a judgment against the Jew. But the Prophet was not in a hurry to give a judgment. He first wanted to make sure what had actually happened. Now the Jewish person in whose house the things had been, the stolen goods had been placed, he walked around his house to see what had happened, and he saw that there was a hole in one of the sacks of the grains or the flour, and he could trace this back to Tama's house, that Tama had brought it to the other house. So anyway, he traced it back and he reported it. Then and the Prophet of course was being pressurized by the Qabila, by the tribe of Bani Zafar. And he might even have said that this is a good Muslim, and I'm sure a Muslim will not do such a thing. But before he could make this judgment, this ayat was revealed. Indeed, we have revealed to you the book with the truth, so that you may judge between people the way God has shown you, and do not become a supporter of the dishonest. So the Prophet was told that this man was dishonest. And of course, then the Prophet, of course, considered all the evidence, and he gave a judgment in favor of the Jew. After this was something remarkable, because even today you find people standing up for their own relatives or friends, even when they know that they are in the wrong. So when this judgment was given, Taimur ran away to Makkah after the judgment. If he had apologized and done tawbah and accepted his crime, then he would have been forgiven by the Prophet, by the other people, and by God. But he didn't want to do that, so he ran away to Makkah for the judgment, because he knew that in Makkah people will support anyone who has come away from the Prophet. And there it is said that when he was in Makkah, he was trying to steal from another house. He must have been a habitual thief, and the wall fell on him, and he died there and then. So he got his punishment in this world, and the punishment of the hereafter, of course, will always be there waiting for him. The question is, if it had been proved that Taimur was innocent, no, you mean if he was guilty, if it was proved that he was guilty, then what would have been his punishment? Now, I'm not sure if the punishment which is given in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where, the thieves, their hands can be cut off, amputated. I'm not sure if that ayat if that verse had already been revealed or not. But the first thing, of course, would be to take the stuff back and return it to the original owner. And the other punishment, I'm not really sure about what it would have been. But later on, of course, the punishment was amputation of the hand in case of theft. But this I'm saying because in some Muslim countries, they want to bring the Islamization into their laws, and they just say they start by punishing people. But I would like to say, first establish an Islamic society. First establish equality. First establish honesty and justice. And also see to it that no one is going hungry. And then you can give these harsh punishments. Of course, these are criticized internationally, these punishments, but they are supposed to be deterrents. They're supposed to keep people away from these things. If they see one person who is given this punishment, then the others will think twice before they commit the same crime. And in some countries in which these punishments are given, even today, in those countries, there is very little crime of this kind. So this person, Taimur, must have been a hypocrite because he had not accepted the faith truly, and it had not sunk into his heart and mind. So he was just, in a way, pretending to be a Muslim. And so he can be called a hypocrite. Wastaghfirillah innallaha kana ghafura rahima. Seek forgiveness from God, for God is the much forgiving, the ever merciful. For those who are trying to deceive, this seeking forgiveness is for those who are trying to deceive and mislead him, including hypocrites as well as the half-hearted followers of the Quran. The Prophet is being told here to ask forgiveness for these people who are trying to deceive him and mislead him, as in this case. Also, some commentators think that the Prophet is being asked to seek forgiveness for thinking that only Muslims could be honest. And also, this seeking forgiveness, it is like a training for the Muslims to always support and stand for the truth, and not to support the dishonest person, no matter how close a relative or friend, and no matter what the religion of the litigant. Sometimes people think we have to stand for our faith, but this is not standing for the faith if the suspect is a hypocrite, or if he is really guilty. وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ مَنْ كَانَ خَوَّانًا أَثِيمًا. Do not argue for those who deceive themselves. Indeed, God does not like the deceiving sinner. Deceive themselves? How are they deceiving themselves? Because those people, like this man, we have this example in front of us, by telling lies, his crime is double. Firstly, he stole, and secondly, he blamed an innocent person. So that means his punishment will also be doubled. So do not argue for those who deceive themselves. Deceive themselves in the sense that they think they are trying to harm somebody else, but whom are they actually harming? They are harming themselves, because they will be getting all this punishment. يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يَسْتَخْفُونَ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَهُوَ مَعَهُمْ إِذْ يُبَيِّتُونَ مَا لَا يَرْضَى مِنَ الْقَوْلِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِمَا يَعْمَلُونَ مُحِيطًا. They can conceal their plans from the people, but they cannot conceal them from God. So even this tribe of Banu Zafar, who was siding with their tribesmen, they could not conceal the lies they were telling from God. For He is with them even when they secretly consult at night about things which He does not approve. God surrounds all that they do. So if a person is conspiring, making plans to do something wrong, that means, and if they are meeting secretly and trying to hide this planning from other people, that means they have a very weak faith. They're not people of strong faith. If they had a strong faith, then they would be conscious of the fact that God is always watching them and God is always aware. This sentence comes again and again in the Quran, that God knows what you conceal and what you reveal. So if you are thinking you can hide something from God, it means your faith is very weak. Ha antum haulai jadaltum anhum fil hayatid dunya faman yujadilu Allahu anhum yawm al-qiyamati amman yakunu alayhim wakila. Listen, you are the ones who argue for them in this world, but who will argue for them with God on the day of resurrection, or who will be their advocate? So in this world, we can take the help of worldly things, of people in this world or other things, but in the next world, there will be no one to protect anyone else, whether for good or for bad. Even the children will not be able to protect their parents. The parents will not be able to protect their children. No brother and sister, no relationship will be of use. So here it is being said, in a way it's addressed to the tribe Banu Zafar, that you can argue for them for the wrongdoers in this world, but there will be no one to argue for them on the day of resurrection. So who will be their advocate? Who will be standing up for them and speaking for them? So again, here the believers are also being trained to stand for justice and to give the evidence for God. In another place you will find it is said, you have to give the evidence for God, no matter if even it is against your parents. Now that is a very, very difficult thing to do, because you don't think that you would ever, you feel that you can never let your parents down no matter what they have done. But God says you have to be honest, you have to stand up for justice, and you must realize that you are giving your evidence for God. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ سُوءًا أَوْ يَظْلِمْ نَفْسَهُ ثُمَّ يَسْتَغْفِرِ اللَّهَ يَجِدِ اللَّهَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. But the one who commits evil or harms his own soul, then asks forgiveness of God, will find God to be the much forgiving, the ever merciful. So you see, wherever you read in the Quran about severe punishments, about hell, about the wrongdoers and the non-believers going to hell, soon, after that you will find some words which are of comfort, because they say that if you ask for forgiveness, if you do tawbah, then you will find God to be the much forgiving, the ever merciful. Ghafoor is one who forgives a great deal, and Rahim is one who is always merciful. And we must remind ourselves of the Hadith Qudsi, in which we had discussed earlier, in which Allah Ta'ala says, my mercy precedes my wrath. That is, Rahmati sabaqat ghadabi. My raham, my mercy, my kindness is much greater. It goes before my anger and my wrath. So one must remember all this, and there were some Sahaba, or you might call them the companions of the Prophet, who said, we can't accept this faith. We have done so many wrong things. Everything we did was wrong, that we don't think we can be forgiven. And they were told that no matter what you have done, if you ask for forgiveness, then God is there waiting for you to forgive you. وَمَنْ يَكْسِبْ إِثْمًا فَإِنَّمَا يَكْسِبُهُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا. The one who earns the wages of sin does so for himself, for God is the all-knowing, the wise. So again, this concept is being repeated, that whoever does something wrong, who earns the wages of sin, that means he's committed some evil or something wrong, something forbidden, then the wrong he has committed will not affect the other person as much as will affect himself. So God knows whatever was your intention and whatever you were trying to do. وَمَنْ يَكْسِبْ خَطِيَةً أَوْ إِثْمًا ثُمَّ يَرْمِ بِهِ بَرِيًّا فَقَدِ احْتَمَلَ بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا مُبِينًا. The one who commits a fault or a crime, then attributes it to one innocent, will bear the burden of calumny and open sin. So this topic is continuing here, that anyone who has committed a sin or a crime or a fault, and that is one mistake that he has done, and then attributes it to a person who is innocent. This is the second sin that he has committed. So he will bear the burden of calumny and also open sin. So his punishment will also be double. This also refers to Taima and to his relatives who were trying to protect him. وَلَوْلَا فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ وَرَحْمَتُهُ لَهَمَّتْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ أَنْ يُضِلُّوكَ وَمَا يُضِلُّونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَمَا يَضُرُّونَكَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ وَكَانَ فَضْلُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكَ عَظِيمًا. Had it not been for the grace of God and His mercy upon you, a group from among them had decided to misguide you. This, you can see, is a continuation of the same topic, and is addressed to the Prophet ﷺ. But they did not misguide anyone except themselves, and they cannot harm you in the least. He has revealed to you the book and the wisdom, and taught you what you did not know. Great has been the bounty of God upon you. So it's addressed to the Prophet that since God has given you the book and the wisdom to understand the book and the wisdom to explain it to your followers, and taught you what you did not know. So the Prophet ﷺ was given so much knowledge that it is impossible for us to fathom it, to measure it. So great has been the bounty or the blessings of God upon the Prophet. Now, Umru bin Akhtab is a Sahabi, a companion. He related how the Prophet ﷺ once on a certain day, he started a khutbah after the prayer of Fajr. And then he continued the khutbah. He was giving the people, his followers, the knowledge that he had been given. Of course, he couldn't convey all the knowledge to these people or to us because we do not have the means to understand it all. We don't have the mind and the soul to understand it all. But he kept on giving them all these, teaching them. And then it came time for Zohar prayers. So he got down, said his Zohar prayers, led the Zohar congregation, the Jamaat, and then he got onto his mimbar again and he started his khutbah. And he kept doing this until it came time for Maghrib. So the whole day he was passing on some of the knowledge that he had been given. And it is related that he related all that happened before and what was to happen in future. So he was giving them news of the past and the future, which no ordinary human being has, so much knowledge. So this bounty that is being spoken of here, that God has given great bounty, great has been the bounty of God upon you. The bounty, of course, was the prophethood that was bestowed on the Prophet. And the mercy is the special support to him, especially to keep him innocent and inerrant. All the prophets are supposed to be innocent. Innocent means that they do not commit any error knowingly. So, and inerrant means that they will not commit any error knowingly. And also the bounty was that by teaching him what he did not know, all the hidden reality behind events and behind people. So all the knowledge that was given to him was also the greatest bounty that God could bestow on a person. Of course, it is the commentators also say that as compared to the knowledge of God, this knowledge that was given to the Prophet, or the knowledge that the Prophet gave to his followers, was only a drop, was like a drop in the ocean. And even the Prophet himself has said, and it's reported in the Quran, he said that I cannot acquire any knowledge of the unknown by myself. I know only what has been revealed to me. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس ومن يفعل ذلك ابتغاء مرضات الله فسوف نؤتيه أجرا عظيما. There is no good in most of their secret consultations. Najwa means, hiding somewhere and conspiring, planning, plotting to do something. But it can be good or bad. But in what the unbelievers were conspiring to do, there was no good in most of their secret consultations, except for those who promote charity or good deeds or help to re-establish friendly relations between people. Those who perform these good deeds seeking the pleasure of God will be rewarded generously by us. So all these people, the non-believers, and even the people of the book, the Ahl al-Kitab, they were always conspiring against the believers and against the Prophet. And here it is said that most of their secret consultations had it had no good in them, but except if they were trying to promote some acts of charity or some good deed or some help to re-establish friendly relations between people. Islahim bain an-nas. Like, for example, if there are people who have, for some reason, they have turned against each other or they have quarreled, and you feel that it's a minor thing, you can make them friends again, then this is one of the biggest good deeds that you can perform. So those who perform these good deeds seeking the pleasure of God will be rewarded generously by us. Even it is said that even if these secret consultations, or another learned word for this is confabulations, or false statements or calumny, all these things, if they are with a positive intention, even peace negotiations between two countries, these are good deeds. وَمَنْ يُشَاقِقِ الرَّسُولَ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُ الْهُدَى وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ نُوَلِّهِ مَا تَوَلَّى وَنُصْلِهِ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. While he who opposes the messenger after the path of guidance has been made clear for him and follows a path other than the path of the believers, we will let him roam wherever he wishes and then land him in hell. What a wretched place of return. Now, some commentators express their opinion that we will let him roam here means that human beings have been given a choice. They have the freedom of choice, and that is true. That in this world, human beings, there are only two creatures, human beings and the jinn, who have been allowed to make their own choices. Other creatures just have to follow the path that has been chalked out for them. So here it is said that even if somebody opposes the messenger like Tema did, and after the path of guidance has been made clear, after he accepted the faith and he came to know that the Prophet is a real prophet, the book is a real book, he still opposes the messenger because he was more interested in the unimportant things of this world. So, and if he follows a path other than the path of the believers, then we will let him roam wherever he wishes. We will not stop him if he goes to Makkah and if he again conspires with the non-believers or whatever he does. But eventually he will be landing in hell. And that is the worst place. What a wretched place of return. So the biggest punishment will be in the hereafter. I think we will just keep this up to here. Inshallah, next time we will be doing from verse number 116. I think after we are through with Surah An-Nisa, then we can take up that point about the Ghazwa Khaybar. Not the point, but the whole description and the reason behind that hadith that someone had posted because of our own actions. I think somebody has a question here. The question is, it was said in one of the ayats in one of the earlier lessons that whatever bad happens to you is the result of your own mistakes or of your own bad deeds. So actually we have to consider most of the things in the Quran according to their context. Now the context of that was the Battle of Uhud, in which the believers started, they became greedy, and it's not a nice thing to say about the Sahaba, but that's actually what happened. And they said, now the enemy has run away, let us take all their goods, their arms and ammunition and food and whatever it was they had left behind. So they became interested in the inferior things of the world, even when they knew that the Prophet always distributed everything according to, with justice. So, and then after that, they suffered a big defeat, almost a defeat and humiliation. And of course, so many men were lost, 70 Sahaba died. So that is being referred to as a result of the wrong that you had done, right? So whenever we try to understand something from this, we also have to see the background and the context in which that statement is being made. All right, now let's do a little prayer. A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina azaban nar wa adkhilna al jannata ma'al abrar ya azizu ya ghaffar ya rabbil alamin bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Ameen summa ameen. Thank you everybody for joining us, and inshallah we'll see you next time.